recording. I think I'm recording.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
well,
so.
that's what I mean. It's always something else to go wrong.
I'm no pro at this. Not yet, which is surprising.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
The more of these I do, the more I lose faith in my ability to do them. You've got a really nice background, Jude. I've got a real Jude or Judith, shall we call you?
I prefer Jude.
Jude, right?
Yeah,
Okay, that's
I'm more used to Jude when speaking English. Yeah.
right. It's quite nice. I've met very few Judes in my life, so you're one of two that I've met along the way.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Uh Jude, I think everything's good. I think everything's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pour myself a bit. I've been just had the most awful painful back, and I've been medicating myself on
Okay. Uh-huh.
Nurofen and
Uh-huh.
alcohol. So this
All right.
alcohol
Uh-huh. The
medication has
two
been
together, it's a great combo.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh-huh.
it's on top of the lockdown alcohol consumption, so it's kind of
Uh-huh.
pretty medicated.
Are
Yeah,
you
I,
sure
I
you want to do this now, or do you need another
absolutely, I'm
beer
absolutely
first?
sure. Yo, I've brought one here, so this is actually the first one I've had. But I don't know whether it's psychological or what. But so, Jude, welcome to Jam Crack. I've started doing this other podcast, and I've got this little thing in my brain too. They'll say the wrong thing. This is Jam Crack Podcast. You're very welcome to it. You're not someone I know personally at all, beyond what I've
Mm-hmm.
known about you in the past through magazines and currently through things like social media. So, comma, as introduction, comma, today we're going to talk to Jude Spancken, and to get right into it, we're going to talk about how you've maintained what I perceive to be a great love for the act of climbing since performing well in North Wales and I'm guessing early to mid 90s. How you then taken this on to make climbing into your professional career as a coach, and what is it you're seeking to do in this, in your role as a coach, and what are your philosophies? Thirdly, I'm going to see how you've used the act of climbing and the life of climbing to look at the world around you and help you understand what you see and put things into perspective.
Are you sure
Huh?
you need me for this?
And you're going to
You've
tell a
got
few
it all
jokes.
planned out.
Well, I'm just, you know,
Well, I didn't know about this.
no, you probably didn't. You probably didn't, or else you wouldn't
No,
have done it,
no,
would
wonderful.
you?
But you seem very prepared.
No, well, I, because of my bad back, I was lying in bed for a while this afternoon, and just, I clicked on your Instagram profile. It said took me to some sort of
Mhm.
website, and I read a few bits and pieces, and there are just some things that sparked my mind. That's an interesting journey to go on with you if you're up for it. Would you join
Absolutely.
us?
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'm curious. Yeah.
So, as I said, am I right in thinking that you have a very true love for climbing? And by climbing, I mean the movement of climbing, the act of climbing, the people who you meet, the climbing allows you to meet, and what it does for you as a person. I just perceive a love for it all
Mm.
there, and the little bit I observe.
Yeah.
Would you characterize that?
Yeah. I think you've phrased it really well. I feel like climbing from the moment I came across it, from the moment I discovered it, has been a really, well, we can say really steady, really loyal companion in my life. And the love for it has been very steady, changing throughout. And in a way, that's why love is a really good word for it, because it's like a lifelong companion, which you get to know deeper and deeper, and with it, the love changes and grows, and becomes deeper, and there's so many layers to it, and I seem to, I think you've actually quite like the way you describe it. Yeah, many layers to it, which I keep discovering despite getting older. So the the focus is changing, the experiences are changing, but the love for it has stayed with me. Yeah.
What
Hmm.
tell us about your first dates.
My
And this
first
love
date.
affair, yeah.
This
What
love
was your
affair of
first date? So there
climbing.
was love affair.
My first ever date was, let me think. So you will maybe find out throughout this chat that I've got a terrible memory for names and places, route names. But my first date would have been at Swanage.
Okay. As
Um,
a teenager?
I was 17. Yes, yeah. And it was in at Swanage, and I had come over to the UK for a year for an immersion year to learn English. Yeah.
Can you remember the
Mhm.
emotional details of that first experience?
I can, yes. First of all, prior to the climb or to the day out, we had done an abseil at the school I was at. So we then went to Swanage on the weekend and um, abseiled down to the base of the cliff. And for me, that was it. That was it. I've just done my first climb. I hadn't actually clicked on that now the climbing begins. And I clearly remember the feeling of, so I said, so how are we going to get out again? How are we going to get up again? Well, now we go climbing. And that moment I thought, no, it was a real feeling of disbelief that I would now be. I just didn't have an idea of what climbing was. I had never heard about it. I had not grown up with it. I grew up in a very flat place. So I was at Swanage. It was October. There was the sea, and then all these the sea ledges. And I was standing. I can't remember exactly who that we were a group of these students. And yeah, we'd taken up. I don't remember the name of the route or the difficulty. I just remember then being helped to tie in and climb up this cliff and topping out and just having a knowledge of feeling that I've just found something. I found it. Yeah, it was really, really strong feeling. Mm-hmm.
And then, not to labor the analogy, but you would have gone to first base, second base, third base, and this, the old love affair, the affair, gives a few stepping stones along the way from that initial thing was just a mystery to when you felt, oh, now I'm a climber. Did that ever happen? That point?
Good question, because from that first day, so that was during a immersion year in England, in the south of England. Looking back today, I really appreciate the way I got introduced to climbing, and it was the chemistry teacher at that school who then took us out climbing every weekend, and for the whole year, every second weekend maybe, he took us to Swanage, to Cornwall. Half term we would spend on Lundy. In winter, we'd go to Scotland, winter climbing. So for me, it was, and I think throughout the year, I did live in a sort of bubble though, because my English was really basic. I spoke English badly and I understood little. But all these experiences, climbing by the sea, in these different places, sleeping in caves, on cliff tops, camping out in this group and discovering climbing, learning to lead in these places very unfamiliar to me, by the sea, in the mountains, cliffs. So in that year, I got introduced to lead climbing quite quickly, and as I said, I think 2 trips to Lundy, maybe during the year. And then I had to go back to Germany for 2 years, and I just knew I needed to somehow get back in touch with climbing. Because where I lived in Germany at the time, there just wasn't any in northern Germany near Hamburg. So I think that was very. That year in England had marked me in 2 ways. the strongest was the climbing, and I kind of felt I need to find a way to get back to it. And I also did geography as one of the subjects I had to do at school, which I really liked. So I simply, when I finished my school in Germany, I took the English map and I applied to 6 universities by the sea. I think it was Scotland, south of England, and Wales. And one only took me, and it was Aberystwyth University.
Pretty low standards, Aberystwyth.
So,
isn't it funny, those things in life where a huge part of the direction of your life is decided totally by chance? That sort of thing of I'll pick 6 places, anyone will do. And
funny enough, I knew so little about climbing at that time. For me, the criteria was it has to be by the sea. So all 6 universities, but I could have ended up in, I don't know, give me a name on the East Coast.
Kent.
Could have.
You could have ended up in the Wash. There's a place called the Wash.
The Wash. Okay, yeah. I could have ended up in the Wash. Yeah.
Yeah.
I ended up in Aberystwyth.
And is there climbing in Aberystwyth?
There isn't much climbing, but at university there was a climbing club, and I clearly remember walking through the streets of Aberystwyth on my own. I just had arrived. I didn't know anyone. And I was walking towards the pub called the White Horse, where there would be the climbing club meet that night. And you're on your own and you don't know anyone yet. You don't know the place yet, but you just feel happy because you feel you're in the right place. And I felt like that. And I really clearly remember that it was dark, streets were quite empty. I was on my own and I was happy, as if I could feel something good was about to happen. I don't know. And that night in the pub, I was meeting other people who later became really good friends. And I restarted my love affair with climbing then.
Isn't that feeling amazing? That sort of deep down happiness of, this is the right place to be. It's an amazing.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to describe because it's a certain type of happiness, isn't it? It's a real. When you describe that, it comes to mind. I remember one time I went to south of France as a young man, and one day my friends went climbing. So from Apt campsite, I just walked by myself up towards. There's some sort of hillside you could see with 2 bits of an old little rocky outcrop with some buildings on top. Maybe like a 3 or 4 mile walk, and I walked up there by myself and stopped and sketched along the way and read a bit of a book and got up there and had a coffee. And then evening walked back down, then coming down the hill, I could look into the campsite and knew my friends were on this campsite and how beautiful this is, and how, it's nothing. It's me walking down a road towards a campsite. Having just not done very much, but just that the peace was just incredible, and the excitement of that quietness was amazing.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't know why. We don't need to know why. Maybe it feels we're in the right place at the right time, and at that point it's best to just soak it up and enjoy it. Yeah.
So Aberystwyth took you on a journey of climbing and the people there, and it was all
absolutely
all
yes. Right. So I was a very newbie beginner then. So I had a great introduction, but.
In what way did the reality of these next, I'm guessing it was 3 years, what way did the reality of these 3 years differ from your expectation of what they're going to be? Or did you have an expectation?
I don't think I had any expectations. No, I don't think I did. It was really, and maybe that characterizes me a little bit. I tend to just, I reflected on that quite a bit recently because I like looking back sometimes how things come together, and sometimes you just take decisions. They're not done with your head; they're just done with something inside you, and often there's no expectations attached to them. I was just full of curiosity, and it felt I was in the right place, so everything just could unfold from there. And I spent pretty much all my weekends traveling either north or south. Mainly north because it was easier without a car to get to North Wales.
So simple, isn't it? come the weekend, I'll go north or I'll go south. That's the two options.
Yeah. When we had a car, we'd go south. When we didn't have a car, we would hitch north.
Right, okay. Hitchhiking. There's an old word. Yeah.
It's an old word, yeah.
Yeah, for an old idea, something that I've done a lot of. So again, without any expectations, you go hitchhiking, hoping to get to Warsaw or Lamberis. They might take the same amount of time.
Yeah, right. It could take anything from 3 hours to 2 days. Yeah. And strangely enough, thinking back of that, we'd spent the weekends after school, after uni, going to North Wales, and Wednesday afternoon. Now, how committed is this? We would go after lectures to the Beacon from Aberystwyth. I can't remember how long does it take to drive to the Beacon. It's at least 2 hours now, 2.5 hours maybe. So we'd go, because Wednesday lectures finish early, don't they? I can't remember. We drive to the Beacon, and that to me today just seems
Imagine
crazy.
4 people instead of a very small car.
I think we would have a minibus sometimes even. But we'd go to the Beacon, climb, and then drive back and stop in Porthmadog for fish and chips, and then get home in the early morning hours, and then leave again. So Aberystwyth obviously wasn't the best choice for climbing, which I didn't know at the time, but it was the best choice because of the experience I made and the people I met. We're still friends today, so it was all part of the unknown plan.
Right. Okay. So there's a couple of things in my mind as I was doing this. I did a podcast a few nights ago with Karen Magog, and it was talking in the introduction. It's just questioning myself why a lot of these interviews are, because what you're after is just the genuine experience of people in climbing, but they often end up with people who've climbed very well in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And is that just? I was just questioning myself whether that's some sort of like celebrity type thing, or is there a greater understanding that comes with pushing yourself further into that realm? Is there more to be? Will the person you're talking to have learned more about it than the person who climbs the odd weekend? Do you think as you became more dedicated, did your relationship did deepen?
Well, I think first of all, I always like to question what does it mean to climb well? You know,
I know what I mean is people who've become sort of famous. Yeah. Famous is the wrong word, but sort of. Karen Magog was this amazing climber from the 90s and today, who sort of was one of the few women climbing at a certain level. Or I've spoke to Alex Megos or Alex Honnold. These are all, whatever the word is, these sort of people rather than.
Well, I think what carries often or developing into a experienced climber needs a certain passion and love for the activity, and it maybe is that love and that passion for the activity that also that we see in these people, which maybe attracts us to asking questions. Maybe it is something we feel ourselves, so it's always nice to share. I think climbing, we like, sometimes even without talking about it, we share if we've experienced it. I mean, I don't know, I imagine you have, I don't know, I know very little about you, but I imagine you've climbed for a long time now, and it's something very important to you. And so we share this passion, and we maybe through conversation, we're trying to also understand it, or because it seems so weird to be so in love with something that just this I see it as like clambering up some rocks, and it fills you with so much happiness, and it's something so non-important, something so random, but is of great importance to some people, and we can't explain it, so maybe we're looking for ways to find answers.
Yeah, maybe so. But amongst that conversation is the fact that when, again, from the very little I can piece together about you, in sometime in the 90s, you were climbing really well-established or well-respected climbs. Things like, let me guess, You probably did Statement of Youth. I don't know, but did you do Statement of Youth?
I did, yeah. Yes.
Lord of the Flies. You did Lord of the Flies, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
And I mean, I would love to do both of those at some point.
Do you know what I realized today, because I do think a lot about this kind of, I think is the wrong word. I ponder often about the attachment to famous roots or names or grades. And I think I was very protected from the history of roots or the fame of roots, or because I was really, my English I was in a bit of a haze in my first few years in England, because I was speaking English very well by then, but I don't know whether it was the language or whether it's my character. An ex-boyfriend always called me Bubble.
Bubble?
Bubble, maybe because I lived in a bubble. I don't know, but I felt
Bubble.
I was unaware. I felt I was unaware of the meaning of these roots when I
Right.
Which I talked to a friend at some point about. It maybe helped in a way because it took off some pressure.
Absolutely. It's one of the things you're contending with, isn't it? When boxers are about to fight, one of the things they would do is, at least from some bits I've seen, is try and psych each other out. So trying to add a psychological barrier around them that the opponent has to contend with. And obviously you've got to contend with the reputation of these climbs that a lot of people have stories around and sort of big tales to do with it. And it is a tangible challenge, or part of the challenge and part of the reward from doing these things, isn't it?
Yeah, and I can't quite remember. For me, I think I do suspect that I was slightly maybe naive and unaware of the reputation of these routes. For me, it was more, for example, the Cromlech with Lord of the Flies. I simply loved the style of the climbing. It suited me really well. I remember I did my first E1, Cemetery Gates. That was my first E1. And the beauty of that day was not the fact that I did the routes, but for me, the profound beauty of that day is climbing my first E1 with a really, really wonderful friend of mine, Sean. After the climb, I think I went to Llanberis and he hitched back to Aberystwyth. And who picked him up? It was the chemistry teacher who introduced me to climbing a few years later.
Stop. Did they know each other? Did they know each other?
No, they didn't know each other. Huh. But he asked him, what did you just do? And I just did Cemetery Gates with a friend of mine, Jude. And they just talked. And it turned out that it was me and it was him who introduced me in such a beautiful way to climbing. And it was, for me, that climbing my first E1, it wasn't about the route. It was a magic coincidence. So that Andrew, the teacher, his name Andrew Wilachowski, for him it was very special because there's this former student who
just must have meant so. It's almost, I mean,
exactly
the way a teacher might see a student go on to some great academic heights.
Yeah, you could see that. He was very happy. And I still meet up with this person today, Andrew. So we kept in touch, and we still go. We try to go on trips. I've been on great adventures with him since, 25 years later.
Right.
Yeah. So so it was more like, and then you do left wall, and then you do, I forgot the E3 then on the corner, and then you do the corner. I'm terrible with names.
Memory lane.
There's resurrection. There's memory lane, exactly. So, and then there's just a point where
there's such beautiful routes. All those things are just so amazing.
Exactly.
Resurrection is so incredible.
Yeah. So it's just, I call it just a natural progression, maybe, that happens naturally without asking too many questions, maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of your really beautiful days. You know, the way you remember that has been a beautiful day. What other, in those sort of early flourishes with climbing, what other days stand out to you?
It's interesting, these questions, because obviously I didn't know what questions are coming, and now I find it really interesting what flashes up in my mind first thing. This is fascinating. The first thing that came to my mind now, I don't know why, is a route on Lundy called Eclipse, I think. It's a severe, maybe. Was it beautiful? I don't know. I was very stuck on it. That's what I remember. It was a very strong experience. Maybe not necessarily related with I was stuck because my rope work was so bad still. So I was literally stuck with rope drag, and my two belayers below were screaming at me to hurry up because the tide was coming in, and I was stuck. I was completely stuck. I couldn't move forwards. I guess it ended well. I don't remember how it ended. So that's one of the things that come to my mind. I think there's so many memories. It's hard to pick.
Well, just I don't worry about getting the most memorable, but in all those in that journey up until doing things like Lord of the Flies and Statement of Youth, etc. Just a couple of days just to try and find out what motivates you. What's a couple of experiences that jump to your mind, whether it may be good or bad. They don't need to be good, but what's a couple of experiences that sort of wherein you found something special?
Again, I think it's hard to pick a few experiences. Now you're asking the question. If I share really what flashes through my mind, it's really the sceneries and the people, and possibly emotions. There could be emotions. Positive or more scary. So what's flashing through my mind is a lot of landscapes, places, and people, which shows to me maybe that is one of the deep motivations. Yeah, I have so much flashing through my mind right now. It's hard to say.
Is there any one coming to you?
Maybe. I mean, one just comes to my mind is going to Greenland.
You've been to Greenland? I've been to Greenland.
Where did you go? Where?
God, some sort of fjord somewhere near the Baroness, near the Baroness. And
oh yeah, so
the
Baroness, is that close to the Baron?
Yeah, we climbed the Baron.
Oh yeah. So we went to the same chunk of rock.
Huh. So yeah, we were the first people to climb the Baron, 1999 or 2000.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you're just a few years before us.
One of the most amazing
yes, so
amazing
exactly,
times.
You have the scenery in front of you. So if you close your eyes now, you can see the scenery. You can see, so you know exactly where I am right now.
Yeah.
That's great. And who you with? The people.
The most wonderful people. These people, just from the word, it was just like having the most fun from the word go. To when we get back, I was just having the most fun the whole time, and it was just the crack was 90 the whole time. Plus, really into the climbing, really committed to climbing. I remember I was climbing with Ian, and sort of come 6 p.m. one night, the storm's cleared. I was like, "Come on, let's go up there and climb." And the other four were like, "You're kidding? No, come on, let's go." We sort of went up to you're just like a charging horse just to get at the rock, and it was just because, and it's just all so easy because you're so keen. Just that.
And was it July when the days were long, or
can't remember? The days were long, but can't remember.
Yeah. So yeah, you know exactly. So the experience of just being on this island, for I don't know, like 4 weeks, and just living on this island, it was this particular strip is linked to very strong. So I think now I understand. So the experience when answering your questions, that come to mind, they're usually linked to emotions. So they're either emotions because you feel so connected with the people you're with, or you're having experience in the landscape, or moving on rock, or they're linked to emotions. And these emotions can be sad, that can be beautiful, it could be anything in between. So, and Greenland is a good example, because we were on this island for 4 weeks, and without any contact to the outside world.
Nothing, same as us. Nothing.
Yeah. So we didn't plan that, because we dropped our satellite phone into the fjord on arrival. So the feeling of being out there without contact to the outside world, which in our case was then tricky because one of us got hurt. And through luck, a passing boat saw us kind of our, it was okay in the end. But that was that very strong experience, to be on the island with somebody injured, not knowing how bad the injury is, and having no idea, having no ways of getting into contact with anyone. And then other emotions of being just this little community of 7 people in their tents at the foot of this mountain, and randomly trying to climb some lines. We might have, so that means we would have repeated some of your lines. That's
oh, really?
fun.
Huh.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. We did one up the middle, and then one up the right hand side. One up the right hand side called multiple buttocks, which was, myself and Ian were the first people to climb on that route. Was the first one to get up.
Yeah, so I'm sure we would have followed your footsteps at some point.
No way. Yeah. And what else did you do? Any new climbs there? So just to say, this is a bit like you're going to Aberystwyth. I was in the pub one night. Somebody said, "We're going to Greenland. Do you want to come?" Next thing you know, you've said yes. Next thing you know, you're going. And just from that one little, because you sat down in this one empty seat, several months later, you're up in the Arctic Circle. And if I hadn't sat in that seat, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. So you mean, so you mean how it's connected in a way that?
Well, no, just the way chance plays so much of a part in things, almost bigger than all the choices you make somehow.
Yeah. I think a lot of that, if I look at the path where climbing has led me, it was all influenced by chance encounters on the way, because all the destinations I would have chosen or places I would have gone, there would have been, or maybe actually, if I think about it, one of the main influences would have been the people, like either who was suggesting something or who I wanted to climb with. So I think the people, the connection to the people, is one of the strongest influences why climbing was so important for me.
Over your years, have you had a particular partnership or a particular person who's inspired, motivated, and influenced you more than anyone else, or has it just been the gravity of other people?
I think, as I said, the person who got, that's something I looked at recently again. If I could name one person who really changed the path of my life drastically, it would have been this person, Andrew Lachowski, who meeting this person who I can say my life went 180 degrees in a new direction. And then along the path I never went through phases where I just had one particular climbing partner. So the years in Aberystwyth, I climbed with several people. And then later I lived in North Wales for, 7-8 years maybe. And in those years, various climbing partners, many of you have known Leanne Callaghan. Climbed a lot with her. Do you know her? Climbed a little bit with Pete Robbins. He got
previous guest.
Yeah. It was lovely actually talking and listening to your podcast. familiar voices. It almost feels like, you're meeting them again.
Yeah.
Pete got me into trouble almost a couple of times.
He got you into trouble?
Because he's so... I clearly remember I had a really hard time on right wall. Really, it was not a positive experience. And it was the day I was climbing with Pete and I was belaying on something on the right-hand side. Is it an E7 on the right side, maybe? And I was really tired that day. I had hurt my arm a little the day before bouldering. And I remember Pete's cheerful voice just saying, "Oh, just have a go. Just do it. He probably said something like it's easy or something." And I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for right wall, and I had a horrible time on it. But that's how you learn, and that's how you, just because you have a horrible time on one route, it doesn't mean you can't then do other routes at that difficulty or that challenge. It's a matter of learning.
There's one time up at Stanage one day, I was feeling a bit tired. At the left-hand end of Stanage is an E66B called Heath Robinson. I always fancied trying it, but I wasn't feeling that good. It was a sort of scripty day. I went up and put some runners in and went higher. I just thought, if I go higher now, I'm going to be really committed, and I'm not really feeling it. I'm a bit scared. So, fuck it, I'll just come down. So I just came down and took the gear out and came back to the ground. And sometime later I was in the pub with Pete Robbins. He said, "Oh, Grandma, what have you been up to?" And I said, just recently been up in Stanage, just trying. I had to go at Heath Robinson, but went up and put some gear in, went to commit, but I just wasn't really feeling it. So, I couldn't commit. You know the way it is yourself. Looking for a bit of sort of, not sympathy, but humanity. And Pete just sort of looking at me and sort of, there was no, I wanted Pete to say something like, "Oh yeah, I've got days like that," but Pete just looked at me, he couldn't understand what I was saying. He couldn't compute the fact that I just I wasn't feeling very brave, so I came down. You know what it's like? Yeah. He's going, "No, I don't understand what you mean."
No, I really see that, and I learned with time to be more cautious about his route suggestions. Yeah. Pete, streaky a little bit, but no, I've a variety of people. I've not. Obviously, I was. Have you met Matt Perrier?
Ugh, once.
I was with him for many years, so obviously I was climbing with him a lot. But no fixed climbing partners. I think, and I can't really say I had climbers I looked up to, or and to be honest, I mean, let's face it, I was surprised you asked me to come on this podcast, because I never considered.
I thought you were somebody else. I mistook you for somebody else, Jude.
Well, maybe I thought because, or maybe I thought maybe he's having a hard time finding people, so I'm taking pity on you and I come on. But because I never considered myself as somebody who was climbing particular well, or was doing things. I mean, so I was surprised that you asked me, and then when I asked you what you would like to talk about, then I felt more comfortable saying, okay, yeah, because that's more, yeah, that's what I'm really passionate about.
Okay, so
rather than
how this happens, it's for some reason the name will flash through my mind, someone who I think has contributed something to our sport, and then the next thing is just a gut instinct. Will there be somewhere to go in the conversation? And kind of if the answer is yes, then it's let's do it, because there isn't this. I'm really enjoying this conversation, and that's why I do the podcast for this moment that we are in right now. Is why I put the time and effort into creating a podcast. It's for this. These are interesting talks, and so that's why you're looking for someone more than a top climber, someone who seems to have what I would see as an outlook on it that could help me and mine. When I guess it's partially influenced by the fact that you put thoughtful stuff on social media, which engages me. And
But exactly, and I think this is what I mean. My climbing has changed over the years, but not changed at the same time. So if I look at what fascinated and captured me about climbing in the initial years, it's that, again, we don't really have words for it, but there's a feeling of community and connection and nature and this, and then this feeling of moving in the vertical, which is different to what we do most of the time, which is walking in the horizontal. And it's a new feeling. And then I think the ability or not ability to climb evolves with that. If you're really passionate about something and I think this is for me the key, if you keep loving it and you're joyful about it, you naturally progress with it. And progression doesn't necessarily mean that I climb harder and harder grades. You evolve if you keep exploring it and you keep following that just innate feeling of I love this, then you evolve in whatever way that is. I mean, how many years have you been climbing now?
Since 1986.
Okay, so.
And in many ways, I feel I climb better. I'm not quite as fit, but I climb better than I've ever climbed because of my intuition is better, and how I can unlock myself has improved greatly over the years. One of the things that this unlocking comes down to is I ghost wrote Jerry Moffat's autobiography called Revelations, and that's an amazing experience. You sort of go inside the head of somebody who climbed incredibly well, and they sort of imbue some of the things that he talked about. And the one amongst it all is how much fun it is to try really hard. They really enjoyed trying really hard, and that it really made my experience of climbing improve so much when I understood that. But an understanding can take a lot of time, can't it? It's not.
It can take years. Yeah. It can take so many years, and it doesn't come through. In my case, it didn't come through conscious searching. It comes through experiences you make on the way. So I find that really interesting. So and one question I have for you: do you feel you climb? You can access your climbing easier today than in the past? Do you climb as much or less, or
less, much less? But early in the summer, I was down in the cornice. I'd done some dead hanging during the lockdown when it was okay to go to the cornice. I went down, and when I was climbing a lot, so this is a really funny thing. I've never climbed that well really. Back when I was climbing a lot, to flash 7A was a really good level, and I was really pleased with it. So, but still, and anyone who's climbed any level, I think that's just so pathetic. But now I can go and still flash 7A, and because of my mind, that's almost gold medal performance.
But
it makes me really happy.
Yeah. So
I never sort of overtrained. So, yeah. I'm so grateful I never applied myself to training, because now climbing is still you get those people who maybe climb well and now they call themselves, I'm old and fat. That sort of thing of people describe themselves, I'm weak and fat. And that's a really common thing. Maybe it's a male thing to sort of, I'm too old and fat. I'm too weak and fat now. Because that's because they created this voodoo doll 15 years ago. There was a very sort of skinny, strong voodoo doll, and they compare themselves today against that thing that they managed to create at one point. But because I never managed to do that, or didn't have the application to do that, I'm still just comparing myself to the sort of a very similar model. So I can still get to a stage where I think I'm climbing really well.
You sound we're like in a similar boat. But exactly, I climb so much less than before. Yeah. And I climb now after...
Back in the day, I climbed E8s, but I did them after top rope, so I think that doesn't mean anything. It's just, you're someone who sort of decided to do an E8, so I don't measure myself against that, if you know what I mean. Which is
I don't know, is that not what people do? I'm like, how many people on site eat E8s?
Peter Robbins and James McAfee. But
Oh,
I'm just saying.
I mean, there's very few.
Very few, I know. But even back then, if someone had said,
Mhm.
"What grade do you climb?" There's no way E8 wouldn't have entered my head as a grade of, well, E5, E6 kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
so again, even though you got this number to wave around, it doesn't detract from the fact that, oh well.
Well, this is why I feel grades are so. I mean, personally, this is personal. I find for me that really irrelevant, and it there is nothing I can answer to the question what grade to climb, because I really don't know. Because, well, is it today or 10 years ago or in 2 weeks ago or in 1 year? It is so. I can't quite describe how I feel about it, but for me, they're just initially they were a guidance to not hurt myself when it was track climbing. And later there was probably a phase in my climbing about 10 years ago when I started to slightly fall into what I call a trap of being dominated by them, when you kind of use them as I don't know, to get somewhere. And then I realized where do I want to get to actually? And then I turned back, and today for me they're a fun, again, they're a guidance. I do less track climbing today, so they're more a guidance of finding creating the right frame. Yeah, maybe I can phrase it that way. Today, grades for me are a way to create a frame, an environment on a given day, and that changes from day to day. In that, create an environment and frame in which I can then go on a journey. But as soon as the frame is decided and created, the grade falls away and it's not important anymore because I set my frame. So whatever that grade is irrelevant. And then I go on the journey within that frame of like, and this is what climbing I've become so passionate about these days, of movement exploration. And I understand today that climbing is absolutely how do you say
Limitless.
Limitless. For me, it's like almost like now this might sound weird, or I don't know whether I'm clear, but it's almost like an internal universe which you can travel in forever. Like you travel into space because you always discover something new. The way you can move. Any of this makes sense?
Well, I'm going to dig into what you're saying. We'll get there. But so by moving, okay, you could say one way of moving is if you look at competition climbs, someone will come up with a sort of a trick, and you're meant to replicate that trick.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a performance of a trick. I don't think you mean that particularly, although there is that's a lot to do with movement, but it's more like there's something different in that I believe you're saying.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, maybe and especially if you look at bouldering or you're at a bouldering wall with friends and you're all trying to do a move and how to do that move, and that's a fun exploration. It's great, your questions, because it makes me realize actually what I'm experiencing. So that's one thing, and that's so much fun. Just
no, but you're not explaining
trying to do moves.
Okay, sorry, we're within the brackets of the explanation, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now let's say what I'm looking for today, or not looking for, I'm not looking for anything. What gives me so much fun today when I climb is whatever route you're on, whether it's something that comes easily to you or whether it's at your limit. You can always explore how to move more efficiently and more in harmony with every move. And to me, that's completely irrelevant of the grade. So I can climb a 5C, I'm talking about sport grades now, and go and explore that, or I can go on a 7C and go and explore that. It's just that the ingredients needed are different. So I have this really strong belief that we can become better climber and we can progress in our climbing within a given grade. I think you could climb the same 6A a whole year every day and discover something new every day, if you're open to it.
Yeah. So a little sort of reflection on what you're saying. I've been in places and you hear people talking, oh yeah, I've done Italy, and I've done, you might be in India, somebody might say I've done Varanasi, and I've done Delhi, and I'd sort of sit back and go, that's pathetic, the way this concept you have of you've done something. But at the same time, I might hear myself saying, I've done Ulysses, as if this one journey up it is the same as this traveler's 3-day visit to some city, thinking now that's done, the sort of idea that now it's over. And I just reflected on how, well, what do I mean when I've done Ulysses? It's almost like there's nothing more to be had from it.
Is it a trad route?
It's a highball thing on the Stanage, or any climb.
And obviously when it's let's say highballs or routes with serious consequences in case you don't do them, then to do them over and over again, that's probably not what I personally could do, or I don't know who could do that. Because
Adam Long does it.
Yeah.
And then one day I watched him. He went to Stanage, and I was taking photographs for a guidebook. And Adam Long's he's a real mover. He's a mover.
I've seen him climb.
And he put his boots on, and he almost looked at me and said, check this out. Like sort of, not cockiness, but just like, if somebody's really good at something, say, right, watch this. And he went up and did Ulysses. He did the E3 left of Ulysses, Arret, and then he did it in the right. Then he ended up Glass Groove facing outwards, and then came down, did Ulysses, and then White Wand, all with no bouldering matches, one after the other. I was like, oh my God, look at that. And people call him the show pony because he'll do that in front of people, but it was just watching this mastery. It was just amazing. And I found some photographs which is, wow, look at those photographs, look at that mastery. He'd done this over and over and over again, and it was just an amazing thing to see.
And that to me shows some real ability, in climbing too. There is one thing of doing a route that's heady once, and then you've done it and you walk away and you never do it again. But doing it several times or over and over again, that requires a headspace that I've never been in. So I don't know how that feels. It's not. I don't think I would have that ability. But it's amazing. But I've had it, for example, on sport routes where you've just done a lot of effort. You might have taken you a couple of days or whatever, and then you do it. And then I tend to do them again. And I had people, you say people, oh, what a perfectionist you are. And I said, but now I can, for me, it's just, you can then, it becomes really interesting. Then you can start exploring. Okay, how do I feel now doing this route? The pressure is off red pointing it. So for me, you can learn so much on getting back on routes you've done and that work been hard for you, because for me, the exploration starts there. Climbing with the pressure of red pointing and then climbing without, you learn so much of like, oh, I put so much more effort into that move before, or oh, look, why am I so much more relaxed now here? And then you realize, oh my God, I was climbing that with so much effort and I didn't really need that before. So that's when I realized, when I started doing that, I realized, wow, okay.
So I want to butt in here. I'm going to say that almost by doing not what you're doing, you're teaching yourself that climbing is all about struggle. But then if you travel beyond that and look backwards at something, i.e. repeating something for the second, third or fourth time, you realize, oh no, I can make that thing feel easier and easier and easier and more natural.
Yeah, and it's not, of course, that you get to know the route better and stuff, but it's not actually that just, it's that something changes, like it's a mindset. It's the pressures you put on yourself. It's more like a psychological change that happens.
Okay.
And it's if you start exploring that, and then you learn, okay, I could actually take this, what I've just learned, to a harder route, or a route I haven't done yet. Because once you've felt something, you can easier access that feeling again. A lot of people I've observed after a hard red point, they don't like to get on it again because the feeling that I might not be able to repeat it is uncomfortable. But I think there's a lot to learn when you do that. I was recently on a route and back in summer, which was, it took me a while to do. And there was a day and I was falling off over and over again at the same spot. And then I was sitting there on the road and thinking, why is this so hard? And then it was like a bit like a light bulb moment. I thought, oh, but maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm just making this really hard in my mind. And I looked at it for a while and then I thought, and what if I just do it? And then I did it. And then it felt so easy. And I immediately said, stop, lower me down. And I just walked away and I thought, okay, that's what was that just then? That wasn't, I suddenly got stronger or the sequence was different. It was literally just a tight, like little switch changing inside about my perception of the sequence. It was a sequence of 6 moves. Okay. And then I walked away and I just went back to the campsite and I just reminded myself of how that feeling inside felt. So rather than repeating the route in my mind, I kept trying to access the feeling of my perception of the route. And then the next day I went and did it easily. So it's just one of many examples of the fun, of the things I enjoy these days a lot in climbing, the micro exploration.
Are you a coach?
I mean, yeah, I'm a climbing instructor, guide, coach. Yeah,
whatever
you want to call it.
You were taking someone out climbing. How do you go about instilling that state of mind in someone?
How to study it, or how to
instill that that knowledge and that really reaction to things.
Yeah, perception. I think, I mean, what I intend to do when I work with people, I mean, I think I have this naive little this naive dream of somehow showing people how they can maybe share what I'm experiencing, how you can really climb free of any attachment to the outcome or the grade of a route, because I think it's a really beautiful experience, and which means that climbing will forever be fun. And I think, I mean, it's tricky because climbing is a really interesting sport in that respect, because, I mean, can you think of other sports where there's such a clear, I mean, there's a top to reach. I mean, if you look at 100-meter sprinting, there's also an end to reach, or any, but compared to, but there's a very clear bottom and the top, and other than, like, when you're running, you might be faster or slower, but climbing is so cruel in that when you lose it, you fall, so you don't get there. You can always reach in a running race. You can always reach at least the end.
See, I've got a different experience from that, Jude. I'm just thinking for me. Okay, take the route positron E56A on Go Garth.
Yeah, I know.
People say, "Have you done positron?" I don't hesitate in saying yes, but then they ask me more about it, and I'll describe how I I fell off on the underclings at the end of that rising traverse, and then got back on and did it. And then they might look and think, but you mean so you fell off on it? And I totally don't care that I fell off on it because I climbed it really well.
But that's beautiful.
It's
that's beautiful.
Totally beautiful. And
yeah.
no one can take that away from me. And they think, I mean, if someone says that you haven't do it, I just think what you want. I don't care what you think, because in me, I just climbed that thing so well and with no hesitation, and overcame all my fear to get on and just climbed without hesitation. Okay, the rope was weighted at one point, but I don't never hesitate in saying I've done positron.
And that is so beautiful. And how many people do you know who can think like that or feel like that when they're climbing? I don't know.
It's me and that guy who lies, that other liar I know from Manchester. That other fantasist, I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, I mean that.
So I'm just sort of contradicting your bottom and top thing from my experience.
But, so maybe I clarify. So what a lot of people feel so much frustration when they don't reach the top, and if we can let go of that and really learn to appreciate everything there's to learn on the way. So whether you fall or not, it's a journey, isn't it? So the moment you step on the rock, it's a journey, and by trying to get to the top as quick as possible, or putting all your attention into doing it without falling, or you might be missing some really cool stuff on the journey. And what you just described is so beautiful. Like everything just for you worked out on that climb. You confronted your fears. You climbed well. You put your whole soul in the climb. So you've done it.
And there's a thing too. The thing about falling off. For me, the most beautiful moment in climbing is that one thing when you've given 100% of your effort, but there's something inside you drags out another 0.5%. And if you are that 0.5% over 100, that's the most beautiful. Some of the most beautiful moments in my life have been in that sort of little 0.5%. And if that results in a fall, it's more likely you've got to that point than if you flash something. So almost in the falling situation, you've really gone somewhere you don't go when you sort of succeed.
When you succeed, you might have had some more in you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why people try to find harder and harder climbs to find that, and then the zen takes over. But to come back to your question, how to instill that in somebody, it's so what I was trying to get at. It's not easy because I find people get very attached to the top. And I think what has helped me a lot, finding that really fine balance. Well, I've defined the top. So we define a grade like the top of a route. But then going on that journey basically and really living it to the fullest, each little micro movement and subtle hip shift and body like foot pressure and hand change and breath and letting completely go off the outcome. And that is something that can be learned. That's what I enjoy trying to do in my work, to really climbing is a beautiful tool to be in the present moment and to learn about yourself and to learn how to move, but mostly how to be present and really get to know yourself. And it's almost like stepping on the stage. The moment you step onto the rock, you're stepping on stage and you go for an exploration. And for me, why rush to the top? There's a lot to discover on the way.
Jude, this is so refreshing because I've just sort of had a feeling lately about what climbing was. Climbing was that thing you described earlier on, swanage, and then there was sort of sport climbing became the paradigm, and then over the recent years, climbing's become indoor climbing. So climbing means indoor climbing, and the other thing is called outdoor climbing, and you get this sort of that's not real climbing. But lately, climbing has more and more, maybe lockdowns exacerbated this, it's become a thing you train for. And climbing, and there's sort of, you look at social media, it's all about people hanging off small edges, and you sort of think, is this because the coaches are now counting on loads of money, putting people in training programs, and you see lots of people doing strength, and my reaction is, look what you've done to this beautiful sport. This was a beautiful sport, and now it's just something. It's just hanging off bits of wood on your monthly training plans, and it's sort of, and part of me begrudges that, but partly I think, oh well, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing because one still has one's own thing. But it's sort of, it does. I have got a sort of connection to this thing known as climbing, and it does disappoint me now to see that it's become a thing that coaches control. The really galling thing is Tom Randall, because he's actually
what does that mean?
Yeah, galling is annoying. The really annoying thing is that Tom's actually a really nice guy, which makes it if only he was an asshole. If only Tom was an asshole, it would be all so much easier to sort of categorize. So it makes me, it's always good to realize you're wrong about things, or you're thinking about I don't mean Tom being an asshole, I mean, but this sort of thing, but it does seem strange now. Climbing is now moving into a thing that is measured, and it's all about measuring and staticness. It's just you do, and that's how that people will now become a good climber because they can do this for longer than other people. They can do this in a smaller hold than other people, and they can do this with greater weight hanging off their testicles than other people. And that's how soon you'll have somebody who's known as a really good climber who might not even go to an indoor wall, but just might be really good at hanging off a 1-inch edge.
No, it's really, I find it really
so
fascinating.
to hear you talking about it in terms of movement and experiences,
so but maybe explain to you how so we evolve in our climbing. So how today, if I look at my climbing today, I love movement, and I've climbed for 25 years. I climb way less today than I did in the past, and I climb as well today. I climb actually way better, and by better, I don't mean harder grades. I can see and feel, and that I'm a much more how do you say? I'm a more efficient and experienced climber. Now then, I train very little. So how can I climb as well as I did when I climbed so much more today? And that's a bit what we got on earlier. But it is because I really focus on movement. And I remember this experience moving to Chamonix, and I arrived in Chamonix and I climbed a route called Rêve du Singe, which is a really beautiful and it has a
Dream
very
of
powerful
Dream of the monkey.
Yeah. It has a very powerful first half and then a very technical second half. And I really struggled on the first half and took me a long time. And then I flashed the top part. And then I did my climbing coach certificate in France, and you learn all about training and training plans and this and that and that. And I started applying it. It's fun, and I got strong, and I got back on the route, and I couldn't.
I know where you're going with this.
And I did the first part easily, and the second part I couldn't do. And that's when I said stop. And that's when I realized what had happened. I've become a strong climber, and I lost my ability to climb. And that was a turning point for me. And there were stronger turning points for me. But that's when I really understood something. And then very shortly after that, I started developing a lot of shoulder issues. They weren't related to climbing. I was doing rope access work at the time, so it's another story. But I stopped climbing completely for 2 years. For 1 year completely, and then for about a year I just climbed very easily until I figured out what was going on with my body. And I wasn't climbing anything harder than 5C, maybe sport climbing. And that's when I learned how to move again. And that's when I realized, in what direction I had gone, and that it was a direction which I didn't work for me. And then I got more and more interested in movement through my body issues. Yeah, not injuries, the various aches and pains I had. And I feel like now I'm coming back a full circle where my body is working again, and today I'm 44 and I have no body pains, and I'm climbing as well as before. And it's not because I'm training. It's not at all. So this is what I'm trying now to implement in when I work with people. I'm not physical training is not necessary. It's just what I see, what I find with all this media as well. Unfortunate for those people who come into the sport is that when you're finding the physical training appropriate to where you are on the journey, and these climbers who are coming into the sport today, they get bombarded with all this physical stuff, and well targeted physical training can help, but it's maybe not fingerboarding or compassing or whatever is out there. And I think personally, I find it my duty to guide. I don't see myself as a coach or instructor. I would like to hope I guide people towards what they need at a certain moment in their climbing to really find their full potential at the moment where they are. And especially finding the love and joy in climbing, and stay injury free as well.
It's coming around to another thing that's been prominent lately is because it's the whole training thing's to do with performance. It puts the focus in performance, and of course now you've lots of talk about eating disorders, which feeds off that same need. If I do this, my number will increase, and it's just it's the lure of that number, which is very obviously marketing knows all about the number, because that's what the marketing's all about. Get your number up, train harder. I'm going to fuck my shoulders, doesn't matter, get your number up. I better lose if I go on I'll start restricting my eating, it'll damage me. Doesn't matter, get the number up. And that's what it's all about, getting the number up. And in my climbing, that's getting your number up, because I want to get my number up because I think E5s are the most beautiful routes in the UK. But that focus on getting the number up is pretty tough message.
I think it's a tough message, and I think it buries the beauty there is to discover in climbing. There's
Absolutely.
so much beauty to be found in rock climbing, or indoor climbing even.
Absolutely.
That is simply buried by the number chase. And as I say, I think grades, I think it's quite unique in climbing that we have grades and the grading system, because they can guide us, as I described earlier, set a frame in which I can then explore and learn and stuff. But it has become quite unbalanced. And I don't know whether it was maybe always like this, or maybe it's I feel like it's more like this.
I don't know. I think a young person coming into the sport today will very quickly come under that pressure, whereas that wasn't. I guess it is not to do with climbing at society, because they're sort of losing weight. If you look at Instagram, just constant apps to lose weight and get stronger and run faster. And so it's kind of a paradigm of today, isn't it? That dissatisfaction is feeding on dissatisfaction with yourself, isn't it?
But where does that come from, that dissatisfaction? I'm pondering. Yeah, I'm pondering. Can you remember when the first years of climbing, were grades as important, or
they were? They had a mystique. Yeah. They definitely had a mystique. Imagine climbing.
Because I remember, for example, going to a bouldering wall or climbing just at the seawall in Aberystwyth, and it was all about fun and movement and challenging each other and friendly competition. But there weren't any grades, because the climbing wall in Machanklet was just a there were no colors. It was just one of those walls, gray. Everything's gray with like, and or as I said earlier, maybe I was just naive in a bubble and unable to understand English well enough to understand.
Everyone was laughing at you.
No, but I do remember moments of people reading out the guidebook for me while I was struggling on lead and telling me, go over the bulge. What's a bulge? What's a groove? I just didn't understand. No, but I think it's up to us coaches, instructors to bring people, to bring some balance back into it, maybe. Personally, I don't know whether you've had any observations, but it's a topic that's very dear to me as well, that I see a lot of actual negative emotions also linked to the sport as well, to grades, to performance, competition. I see, frustration in people, or during my years in Chamonix, I've seen a lot of, in my eyes, not necessarily healthy competition.
So I was just reading this weight loss thing. I was reading a thread on UK Bouldering today, and one person said at one point I had to decide, do I want to be miserable in Climate B or be fairly happy in Climate A? And I came down for be fairly happy in Climate A, and it's just it seemed like I was a brave choice not to sort of make all the sacrifices and all the not that sacrifice is a bad thing, but sort of deform the sport into this thing. I don't want to be judgmental of what climbing is for people. It is to everyone whatever it is, and I've got my vision of it, and everyone's got their own vision of it. But what you were saying earlier on, it's such a beautiful thing, and there's so much beauty in it. And if performance becomes your thing, and weight loss and strength, there's never any talk of beauty in there anymore. It just doesn't come up. It's just PBs, max hangs. So it's beauty's been squeezed out of the gig.
It may be. As you say, maybe so my personal experience of climbing is that it has, or coming back actually directly to what you say. So I agree that everyone has to find their journey in climbing, and it has different meanings for different people. But I think one important question to ask oneself, no matter what climbing is for you, is like, actually, how do I feel? And is this good for me? Is this good for me right now on an emotional level, on a physical level, on a mental level? Is this adding to my life in a positive way? And I think it's really important to sometimes really stop and ask yourself that question, like, what am I actually experiencing? And if I'm experiencing frustration, feeling of inferiority because I'm comparing myself constantly to others, if I'm constantly like injured, there's maybe something wrong as well in my way to go about climbing. But I think this actually consciously stopping and asking myself, am I actually feeling joy in this? Then maybe some people would change something. And that actually makes me think every single person, I assume, would have experienced some sort of joy in climbing when they first started. And we are all pretty shit when we start. When we start our climbing, we don't think about being the best.
Yeah, no.
And when does that change? When does that flick? When is the switch flicked over? When from, oh, this is fun, I'm loving this, to I want to get better. And this is something I've asked myself, where is the switch in people? At what point in your evolution as a climber? From
the moment I came into it, it was about pushing yourself. It wasn't
yeah.
about, so it was almost at any day you go climbing, you're going to be as pumped and as frightened as you can manage that day. And
that sounds terrible to me.
and maybe it was terrible. It was mad. Even at
No.
sort of at hard severe VS, even at those levels, if you could get in the ring, you got in the ring. And it was, and I struggled with that for a long time. And for a long time, climbing was just so terrifying me because you knew that was the way. You had to, every day you had to get in the ring. And living in Ireland, in the rain, up in mountains, heather, bogs, everything sopping. These were low grades, but still you're at the max physically and emotionally all the time. And that was the gig.
And I have a question, like, did you enjoy the feeling of being terrified?
No,
Is that something
it was just crushing. And it's funny you mentioned
that feeling always.
For me, I went to Buchs one time and think sport climbing is going to be really easy. Before everyone sport climbing, I went to Buchs and found it actually was just as terrifying. But I came back from there a bit fitter. And one day I went up to do Resurrection. And because I was fitter, it was a big E4 in the Cromlech, big intimidating route, but I was fit enough for it. I remember just loving it. It was the first time I'd ever been out there on a route like that and thinking I'd gotten over something on that route. I'd gotten over some sort of, after all the years, finally, I want to be here. And it took me all the way up to E4, up to like years of climbing to get to that point. So, and you could say, why did you do it? It was just, I don't know. It was just the feeling of just almost been sick with terror going even to do a well-protected route.
I'm really impressed you climbed as long as you did, like you carried on with the feeling of terror.
Because everything else was so good. Everything else about it was so brilliant.
Yeah.
And it was. Everything was about it was so brilliant.
You see, that's something I learned very early on in climbing, that I didn't like the feeling of being scared. And it made me very quickly adjust my route choices, I was very clear very early on, I'm not climbing for the adrenaline. And when it happened often in the early years, because you haven't learned yet to judge your body, you don't know yourself and the activity well enough yet. And it's only now that I can turn the dial precisely to find.
Yeah. Have you done strawberries?
No. I think in your mind, I'm a much more, I'm a much better climber than I.
Now you tell me. At the end of the interview, now you tell me.
No, I have not. I actually, I'd like to try it one day. Yeah.
What else to do in your? Where are you? Whereabouts are you at the minute? Are you in France?
Right now, I'm in the Alsace in France, near Basel.
Right.
Yeah, it's a temporary place. I've moved here to do a course. So I'm going back to school. Have you heard of the Alexander technique?
Yes, it's about how you hold your body. It's about your body in relationship to the world. Is that right?
A little bit. Like it's about how to use yourself in well, you can say, yeah. It's somatic body.
What's somatic?
It's a method to find real harmony and efficiency in your everyday life. Yeah.
Does climbing help you find harmony in the world, Jude?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's honestly, I can say climbing has been a really has really helped me to understand who I am, what I need to feel balanced. It has helped me. Showed me who I am and what I need in life to be a happy and balanced person. Yeah, it's been really good teacher for that, for sure. And this is what I'm trying. For the reasons you mentioned as well, seeing there's so much focus on performance and and grades and the push and the push and the push. And I hope to somehow trickle back the love and beauty and really what a beautiful discovery journey about yourself climbing can be. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to go back and say that thing about I would love to do 8A at one point myself. I've never climbed 8A. I would love to do 8A, and just I'm not impervious to these numbers, and I've got a beast maker over there, and I dead hang, and so I'm sort of I'm just conscious, a bit critical of all that stuff earlier on. I'm slightly hypocrite myself. But I'm very conscious of how powerful that message is at the minute, and that's kind of why I'm just sort of feeling a bit, whoa, look at the force of this message. And to hear your message is very refreshing.
And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with dreaming big, and there's nothing. And this is so I find it so hard to express. It is so beautiful to challenge yourself and have a great objective. That is beautiful. And this is why grades are really beautiful guidance. So I'm here and I want to get there. Beautiful. Now then, I know where I want to get. Now I put that aside and I bring all my attention to the journey of like, wow, what is it climbing? What is there to discover? Like it's how can I like that challenge I'm giving myself by looking at a high grade or whatever, that's giving me a direction. And that's beautiful because we need a direction in life. We can't, and then I leave it there and I keep it in the back of my mind. And now I bring all to my attention. Okay, what do I need to learn today in order to one day get there? And it's this now where you find so much beauty, and it's not only about, like for you, climbing 8A, my guess is it's a very tiny amount of hanging on your fingerboard or doing specific strength exercises, because you have so much experience and so much love for climbing that without too much extra physical training, I'm sure you climb 8A quite quickly.
Amazing. All right, Jude. Hey,
come over to France and we get
an easy one
together.
You've got an easy one, Reachy maybe.
Easy and Reachy. I show you.
Jude, honestly, I could sit here and chat all night. We've sort of done a good chunk. We've covered so much beautiful stuff, and I've learned so much about you. That's been amazing.
Thanks for having me. I hope it was not too I hope you can do something with it.
No, it's just great. And and as I was saying about Jamcrack, you've listened to it, and again, in contrast to sort of what is the performance side, I really hope that Jamcrack is after what the soul of climbing is, and the way you talk about climbing is all to do with soul. I believe it's almost, what do I mean by that? It's just like soul music. It's how your soul expresses itself, and maybe different from training, which almost seems to be taking your body further away from yourself. Taking steps back towards yourself and trying to get towards yourself, because in life it's very easy. Sometimes I think, well, when's the last time I felt in connection with myself? And just the busyness of life and the way life twists, it can feel it's been quite a while since I've felt in connection with myself. And so the way you talk about it feels like
I can tell to anyone, you can climb a couple of grades harder if you actually learn to slow down and step back, and maybe even for some people it might even mean train less, so they actually learn to listen again to the really fine body attunements that you need to make to climb well. If you train really hard physically, that's the right moment for some people, but for many people, I mean, let's talk about the majority of people. Majority of climbers we are not at the top end, so we might need even the top end climbers. I think there's only so much you can achieve by physical training, and actually, I reckon the other 90% comes from somewhere else. Yeah.
Thank you, Jude. Thanks for a
But you're
lovely
welcome
conversation.
to come climbing with me in France.
Yeah, I would really
Find
love
a
to
nice
do that.
8A for you.
I would really love to do that. And maybe I might even fall off in the red point and I'd still consider
Great.
it done.
Wonderful. I'm with you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for a
Thank you,
lovely
Niall. Nice
mind-broadening
to meet you,
conversation. Yeah, you too.
even if it's just via screen, but hopefully one day in real.
Oh my God. Yeah. Thank you, my friend.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.